What would you do if you had the power to change the world? Would you sell your soul for that power? Would you kill for that power? Would you use that power for your own personal gain? Would you use that power to help others? If you had the power to, say, kill people, could you kill with a clean conscience? Or does the very act of killing sour your own soul? Would you have to give up on your own humanity and fall into the darkness? Fall from the light? The story of Death Note is about a boy, a young man who has to deal with these questions of what is right, of whether he can continue going on his path to create a perfect world, whether he must take upon the burden of damaging his own purity, his own soul, defiling it with the blood of others. This is the story of a young man and a book from another world. The greatest murder weapon in history, the Death. And we are going to talk about Death Note, Takashi Obata and Tsugumi Oba's seminal classic 2003 manga series that has become one of the biggest franchises in the anime manga sphere, and certainly one of the most influential since its debut only 14 years ago.
All the way back in 2003.
Yes, and it spawned a Netflix live-action Death Note film. It spawned numerous previous Japanese live-action films, as well as a Korean drama, and, of course, a incredibly popular anime series directed by Tetsuro Araki. It's a phenomenon, to say the least. The idea of Death Note is just so compelling. What would you do if you had the power to kill people with anonymity? And would you use that power to get rid of the evil people in the world? But in doing that, would you yourself become evil? The series contends with the questions of what is justice, what is right and what is wrong, and follows the downfall of its villain protagonist, like Yagami, from when he starts out as an idealist who genuinely believes that in changing the world for the better, to what he becomes by the end of the series. An embodiment of just narcissistic, egocentrical evil.
I guess we could talk about real quick how we all kind of got into Death Note. I guess Sid, do you want to start real quick?
My story is honestly the shortest because there's nothing really that special about how I got into Death Note. It is not one of those series that was like very formative in my development as an anime manga fan, because it's not one of the first series I ever read or anything. I only got into Death Note, it was probably around 2010 or something, I'm not sure. But, I mean, I just got into it because I heard that people really liked it. I heard it was a popular thing, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I checked it out. I read the manga. I enjoyed it. I watched the anime. I enjoyed it. And that was basically all there was to the story. I didn't really have anything special with Death Note. There was never really any like big personal connection I ever formed with the series based around communities, friendships, or anything. It's that series that has always been around. It's always been insanely popular in popular consciousness. And so, you know, it's just something that you accept in the current anime manga landscape. It's just one of those big series that is essential to understanding anime fandom, and is also one of those few series that has like a mainstream appeal, so even people outside of the anime sphere may know about it, or at least may know of the concept about it and have seen imagery from it. But Death Note, just for me, is a series that I enjoy. I just enjoy it. And I do think that Light Yagami is one of the best anime manga villains that there is. So that is like the one thing I will take away from that, is like something that really stood out to me from the series way back when I first read it. But outside of that, I just don't have anything else really notable to add about my experiences with Death Note.
I think I'm probably in the same boat where, I think I got into Death Note around that same time, actually. I was, I want to say I was still a sophomore in high school, around like 2010, 2009, somewhere around there. That's where, basically Death Note was a series, obviously, that was offered at my high school library amongst other very popular titles at the time. It was just one of those things where, like, I had seen it around a couple of years at that point, and I'd seen it around, and I'd heard so many people talk about it, and I kind of decided just to read it on a whim. I think, it was one of those things I read, during school and whatnot, just to kind of pass the time, and I ended up getting so into it. And for a while, I considered it probably one of my favorite manga of all time. But nowadays, I don't necessarily consider it one of my favorites anymore, just because I've read other series since then that I just love so much more. But, Death Note still holds a special place in my heart, because back when I first read it, I was still technically pretty early on in my manga fandom. And Death Note was just one of those things that during, I guess, my personal renaissance of manga, back when I was reading stuff like this and Eyeshield 21 and Slam Dunk and all these different series that I had just gotten into, stuff that, I was going to say stuff that isn't as popular, but I guess Death Note is kind of the outlier in that, because it is, like Sid said, it has a lot of, it's one of the few series that still really has a lot of mainstream appeal, and is still very well known and beloved. Though I would also say that I think it is still sort of a phenomenon. But God, back then, like years ago, it was huge. Like, it was everywhere. And I knew so many people who were really into it and really loved it. And I feel like we're probably past that point of its phenomenon, but it's still very, like I said, very well known and beloved by a lot of people. Obviously, it's getting a Netflix live action movie, so obviously a lot of people are still very interested in it.
Yeah, again, this is like one of the cornerstone like series in anime manga fandom that like people get into anime through. And its popularity is evergreen. It's enduring. Like, there wouldn't be so many, like, panels at, like, local anime conventions about Death Note, where people dress up as characters from the series and answer questions.
All the Death Note panels.
Yeah. So, it's an incredibly popular series still. There's just a lot of elements about it that just give it a timeless appeal, even though the story, like, in terms of when it's set, is dated by this point, since it spans, like, from 2004 to 2010, basically.
Yeah.
But just the core ideas of the story, the characters, all of that is just still, very resonant. It doesn't feel dated. And, of course, it's just a very unique series in terms of its tone. Because while it is a shonen series, and it definitely takes the idea of, like, a battle manga without battles necessarily. Like, it still has kind of, like, over-the-top, like, speeches and moments of, like, enthusiasm where characters speak about their ideals. The most iconic moment I think about that is the second chapter, when the chapter ends with Light and L both exclaim at the same time, "I am justice!" It still has, like, shonen moments like that, but it is a very dark story in terms of its subject matter, at the very least. And it does take itself a little more seriously, a little more adult than some of its contemporaries at the time, that were very popular, especially in the shonen field. Like, if you look at, like, other Shonen Jump series that were coming out at the same time, there was nothing else like Death Note. And in the years since, it has inspired imitators, but even so, there is an appeal about Death Note, just that has to do with its premise alone, that can never be recaptured. It is a lightning in the bottle kind of series. for me, it's never been necessarily one of my top most favorite series. I don't think I really ever really formed a personal connection to it, but I do think it is an incredibly well written series. So there was a time where I had put it in like my top 20 at the very least, because it is really well done.
Yeah, I was just to step back here a bit. I also wanted to mention, part of the reason I think Death Note blew up in popularity so much is because, at the time, it still has its shonen qualities to it here and there, but overall, like, Death Note made it so big because, there really wasn't anything like it in Jump at the time, and in a lot of aspects, I think is still very unlike Jump, in a lot of ways. Honestly, there were a few times rereading Death Note where I really felt like, this could make for a great, like, seinen type of series. Like, there are a lot of times where I feel like, again, it still has its shonen qualities, but overall, I feel like it is somewhat different from a lot of shonen manga in a lot of ways.
The whole shonen seinen debate about Death Note really, irritates me, because honestly, there isn't that much different between shonen and seinen in terms of what you can do, aside from the fact you can get away with more graphic content in seinen manga.
And nudity.
Like, you can still write a seinen manga with, like, a very immature mentality, and you can write a shonen manga with a very mature mentality. So that whole divide has always irritated me. I hated when there were people who'd insist that, oh no, Death Note is a seinen, even though it ran in Weekly Shonen Jump, just because the subject matter was a little more mature than the likes of, One Piece or Naruto.
And even then, like, a lot of the sexual and violence content comes down to the magazine it's published, and not even the demographic. Like, we can see a drastic difference in violence and sexual content even between Weekly Shonen Jump and Jump Square.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, really, that whole debate with Death Note is pretty meaningless to me. Like, Death Note is just a well-written story that has mature themes and has, interesting things to think about. It's also refreshing because it is about adult characters in a space in anime and manga where like, most series now are about teenagers. Even, series aimed towards adults are about teenagers. And Death Note is about adults. Like, the main characters, they're all adults. Light starts out the series as a young adult, but he is an adult. And that's what makes the series also refreshing, is that, it's about adults. It's about police officers trying to solve the great murder case. And it's a battle of wits. It's not about, like, over-the-top fighting. It's just a police procedural that has interesting twists and turns.
But no, I do kind of agree that that whole debate between what kind of, like, whether it's seinen or shonen, it does seem kind of silly. But I still can't help but feel that I don't know. It makes me. Sometimes it really kind of surprises me, like, like, regardless of, like, what Jump's demographic is, that Jump is still able to get away with a lot of stuff in certain series. Like, Death Note actually was in the same serialization round as Gintama back at the time.
Yeah.
Which I also find kind of interesting. So, like, between this and Gintama, like, there are some series that I'm really surprised that Jump gets away with at some points. And that just comes down to a thing I really like about Jump, is that, sometimes you have your series that are very for a certain demographic. Like, you have stuff like One Piece and Bleach, like the very action heavy series that, those series are perfectly fine with just being for young boys or young men. Those are for a particular audience, and you can tell in the way it's written and how it's executed and whatnot. And then there are those anomalies like Gintama and Death Note, where you kind of think about, like, what sort of demographic Jump usually aims for, and you're kind of like, they can, like, I like stuff that isn't just a slave to its demographic, that is still able to dive into a lot of mature themes and whatnot. And I think that's why I enjoy a lot of manga in Shonen Jump, is that the overall demographic is for mostly young males, but still tackles a lot of different subject matter when depending on the series when it wants to.
Death Note's appeal is definitely in the fact that it isn't anything like what came out during that time. Like, in both, like, the fields of manga and anime, it just is a unique take on this concept. It has very interesting, very distinct characters, and the core drive of the series is this idea of what is justice, and we have two sides of that. We have Light, who believes that justice is getting rid of all evil, and he must take any steps to get rid of that evil, even if it means being evil himself. And L, who believes that Kira isn't justice, Kira is evil, and the idea of bringing Kira to justice, the idea of stopping Kira is justice. So the act of stopping Kira is justice, and that is what L operates on. Just the idea that it isn't right for Kira to be doing what he is doing, and to be operating outside the law. So that is like the core ideological divide that drives most of Death Note. But more than that is just the battle of wits between Light and Alice that's so compelling. Again, what's really engaging about Death Note is like the mind games that Light and L have to like do in order to trick each other into giving them more information, in order to like keep a distance between them, so because any wrong move will result in either Light being captured by L or L being killed by Light. So it's this constant pull of the rope in terms of like giving details when they're needed, but holding back on others and trying to see who will mess up first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But VLord hasn't got much of a chance to say much. I do want to hear from VLord a little bit, because as we've mentioned earlier, this was your first time reading Death Note.
Yeah, so for me, like, Death Note is like one of those things that I've always been like aware of, because it was big in middle school, big in high school, but I just never bothered to read it. But going into this, I kind of knew a lot of the plot anyways, because people talk about this stuff. You kind of just get a grasp on like what exactly happens.
Mm-hmm.
So like I knew a fair bit of what to expect, but after reading the first chapter, what surprised me right away is that Light pretty much becomes a psychopath right away. Like, I was expecting probably something around the lines of, like, Mikado from Durarara, where, like, he slowly just loses his humanity, which Light does do, but it's far more drastic at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, within the first chapter himself, he's already, like, convinced himself to kill like hundreds, if not thousands of people. It like took like maybe one night for him to get over his inhibitions. And
yeah,
like when he starts out killing people, like he does it because he's bored. He wants to like try it out. And he kills like a guy who's not even doing anything really that bad. He's just like flirting with this girl and making her uncomfortable. That's it. It's not like a real crime or anything, but he kills that guy. And he's like, oh, he
brought in Truck-kun.
Yeah, he summons Truck-kun. Maybe he's the reason that Fuka died too.
Yeah,
yeah. So
I kind of disagree with that. I agree with the notion that, you know, Light's transformation from normal high schooler to this psychopath who is hell bent on getting rid of all evil in the world within the first chapter is pretty quick, but there are at least some instances of, like, I don't know if I really want to call it humanity, but I can't think of a different word. Like, there are moments of, like, because, you know, when he kills that guy, it's not like, I don't think he was particularly, like entirely proud of himself. Like, I still, there are still moments where, like, he's still shocked at, like, people dying and, you know, meeting his Shinigami Ryuk and whatnot. So I still think there are, like, bits of humanity in there, but I do agree that his transformation, it all happens within the first chapter. It's not super gradual, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like, He definitely still has humanity at the beginning. It's just that, like, compared to how you'd expect, he kind of gets into the mentality of, okay, I need to save humanity now. I'm the only one who can purge evil from the world, like, really quickly.
Okay, so, like, after, like... Okay, so Light kills, like, the guy who was hitting on that girl in the first chapter, like, just because he wants to see what happens. And then after he does that, and he's like, whoa, I killed, like, 2 people. And so then he, like, does, like... feel a little disgusted with himself, but very quickly, immediately after, he rationalizes that he was doing a service for the world because they were rotten people. The world is rotten, and he needs to clean it up. So, like, again, in one night, in, like, one day, he convinces himself that he is the only one that can clean up the world and who can use the Death Note to change the world and kill all the rotten people.
Yeah.
So, it is, like, pretty immediate in the first chapter, like, him rationalizing, like, what he's doing, that killing people is a good thing. I will say, though, that you know, one thing that the series does go into is that the Death Note itself may corrupt people and lead them astray and, you know, lead them down that path of darkness. Because as we see later, when, like, Yu loses his memories, his entire personality really changes. And we can see he's a lot more of a moral person. He would never really do the things that Kira would do, like manipulating people, killing them out of self-interest. Like, he would not do that. He believes that killing people is wrong when he loses his memories. But with the Death Note in his hands, and with the temptation to try it out, and after actually doing it, and that guilt of doing it then making him rationalize why he should continue to do it, I think that transformation leads credence to the idea that the Death Note does corrupt people, even people who would otherwise turned out to be good people. Like, Light probably could have turned out to be a pretty good person if he never had the Death Note in his hands. Like, it brings out the worst in people.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of do bring this up near the end of the series, where, like, during, like, the final, like, thing when they finally figure out, like, Light is Kira, Nier mentions that if you really were an ordinary person, you would have been so afraid after first using the Death Note that you would have never touched it again. Mm-hmm. Like, the Death Note is definitely corrupting people, but from overuse. But at the same time, they have to have that kind of justification in their mind to keep using it. Like, we see this with the other users too, like Higuchi and Mikami, where they aren't, like, necessarily terrible people before they had the Death Notes, but because they had some sort of belief within them that felt like it justified them continuing to use the Death Note, and that's what made them become, like, psychopaths.
Yeah, they had a strong conviction as well as a certain darkness in their hearts that overtook them once they gained the power to kill people anonymously without, like, fear of judgment. And then they became, like, blinded by that power into thinking that they had the right to use that power in order to get rid of whoever was in their way, to get rid of the evil in the world. It's kind of like how internet commenters act, you know? With the anonymity of the internet, you can say and do horrible things that if in real life you did them, you wouldn't do them because you'd be afraid of being judged. You'd be afraid of being ostracized and people, like, saying, no, what you're doing is wrong. But on the internet, you can say terrible things. You can do horrible things, and you don't have to worry about the fear of repercussion because no one knows that you're doing it. And that's kind of like how Light operates. If people knew Light was using the Death Note, he wouldn't be able to use it in the ways he does because he would be afraid of being judged by society, who openly says that killing people is wrong. But, you know, because he can do it in anonymity, he can operate without that guilt. And as we see, there are people who in public will say what Kira is doing is wrong, killing people is wrong, but on the internet, they support him and they say they're glad for what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So again, it's that concept of what would you do if you had the power to kill people? What would you do if you could get away with killing people without fear of repercussions? How far would you go with it? Would you stop? but Light doesn't stop. Light just continues on, and it consumes them. And he has to keep killing people after a certain point. He can't stop. And the entire series, after a certain point, becomes less about him trying to make the world a better place, but more about being allowed to continue to kill people, to be able to continue being Kira. Because the identity of being Kira, the power that that is what is alluring him. That is what he is clinging to. And that is what he, is like fighting so hard to protect, more so than this idea of a perfect, pure world without any bad people. It stops being about that.
Yeah, it basically becomes more about him developing this sort of like God complex, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes more about him trying to be the god of the new world than him trying to make a pure world. Like, he becomes consumed by the idea that he is God and that everyone who is going against him are blasphemers that deserve to be punished. And this happens pretty early on when he kills the FBI agents. They aren't bad people. He kills them because he doesn't want them to get close to him and discover his secret. And that's it. And he kills a bunch of innocent people, like people who are good people, just to protect that secret.
Yeah. I'd say that was definitely the big turning point where before that it was him killing criminals, and then he's starting to, it stops being about for the greater good, it starts being about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the end of the first volume, Light has pretty much completed that transformation into, like, being obsessed with his god complex. And, like, just becoming a flat-out murderer at that point without any real ideals. He's using the ideals more as a facade to justify what he's doing, rather than actually following those principles. And after that, the only things that he really has that clings to humanity, that like really gives him some humanity, is that he does care a little bit about his family. Just a little bit though. But even then, he slowly comes to see them as disposable in himself. I mean, even in the beginning, he saw his connection with his father and his father's role as the chief of the NPA as something he can exploit and something he can use to protect himself. But as the story goes on, like, he becomes, less connected with, like, his family and, like, use them more as also just pawns that he can use whenever he pleases and kill off whenever he needs to. Like, on his father's deathbed, he cares less about the fact that his dad is dying than the fact that his dad knows who Mello's real name is, and he tries to get his dad to, in his dying breaths, to write out Mello's name. That's all he can think about. All he can think about is killing Mello. He doesn't care that his dad is dying. And that is the scene that completely, finally completes Light's transformation. That's the moment where Light's humanity is completely wiped out, and he's just his mentality, his actions, they are just pure evil, purely irredeemable after that point.
Yeah, like, even before that point, like, when Mello kidnaps Sayu, like, Light saying to himself, worst case scenario, I just kill my dad and Sayu and everything will be fine.
Right. He never brings himself to do it, though, so you could argue that there was something holding him back from, like, pulling the trigger. But in that moment, when his dad is dying, the moment where he thinks to himself, I need to get him to write the name. I need him to get him to write Mello's name. The moment that happens, the moment he starts thinking about that over the fact that his dad is dying, that's the moment where you realize, as a reader, that Light is far gone. There is no going back for him in terms of redeeming him as a human being.
Like, one other point around that time that really stuck out to me was, like, when his dad and the rest of the MP are trying to kind of arrest Mello, and, like, pretty much his dad doesn't shoot him right away. He, like, wants Mello to, like, drop the bomb instead of, like, killing him right away. And Light's legitimately pissed off because of this, because he's like, why don't they kill him? Why don't they just finish him off? What's wrong with them?
God, it's like they're human beings or something.
Light thinks killing is a solution for basically everything, to get rid of everything in his way. Like, he thinks that everyone that's going against him deserves to die. But Soichiro, he is a good person. He would never, kill people without good cause to. And, even, like, at the end, even though a person as dangerous as Mello, put him and his daughters through so much terror, like, he can't bring himself to kill a person. Like, he can't bring himself to take the law into his own hands and pass judgment on a person. Unlike Light, who believes that he has the right to pass judgment because he has the death note.
Yeah.
So I guess in this case, the apple falls very far from the tree.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, but, I was gonna say, yes, Soichiro, if it weren't for Matsuda, I would say that, Soichiro is probably the best character in the entire series.
Soichiro is the purest character in the entire series, I would say.
Yeah.
Because he,
he's MVP.
I'm talking about, like, his character, his moral character here. Because he is, like, he believes in the justice of the law. He believes in, innocent until proven guilty. He believes that it is not right to kill people, to take the law into your own hands and kill people. He believes in passing fair judgment as a society, and that no one person has the right to decide whether someone lives or dies. Like, Soichiro tries so hard throughout the entire series to, like, do the right thing, even though it puts him and his family under so much, like, stress. Like, when L tells him, he is going to put cameras in his home and monitor his family because he suspects one of them of being Kira, Soichiro is like, well, if you're gonna do it, then you better damn well go all the way with it. I want them anywhere. I want you to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that my family is innocent. Like, he will do whatever it takes, even, like, with the emotional burden that it places on him and the stress it puts on him to find out the truth of the case. And for the entire series, he has to contend with this question, like, is my son Kira? And it's, like, tears him up inside. Like, it drives him insane. He has to put himself into confinement alongside, like, Light and Misa when they get put imprisoned, because, he doesn't know what he will do, because it's just too emotional. But he's thinking about it, and he's like, I need to do what's best for the case. Please also put me in confinement. And so, man, it's just so hard to watch, because Light is Kira. He's just using his dad's love for him, and it's just on his deathbed, when Soichiro is looking at Light, and he has, like, the eyes of the Shinigami, so he can, like, see whether someone is a holder of the Death Note, depending on whether, he can see the lifespan or not. And he looks at Light, and he can tell that, okay, my son is not a owner of a Death Note. That has to mean he's not Kira. And he's just so relieved. And it's like, he's tearing up. And of course, Light does not care. Light does not, what? Oh, yeah, whatever, Dad. And Light is just thinking, God, I need to get this guy to kill Mel before he dies. So, it's just, he's such a tragic character. And Ryuk is commenting, everyone who uses the Death Note, suffers tragedy. But I guess Soichiro never found out Light is Kira, so he was spared that at least. And that is just like such a bittersweet note for Soichiro's character.
Yeah, things are really better that way. Because, like, could you imagine if somehow Soichiro found out that he was Kira, like, right before he dies?
He would kill himself. If he, like he said, that if his son is Kira, he would take responsibility and kill himself.
Yeah,
that's the kind of guy he is.
Kill himself.
Like, that's the kind of guy he is. He would take that responsibility upon himself. Like, the guilt of being the father of Kira would be too much for him. He would just die right then and there. Yeah. Like, inside, and then he would kill himself later. In that respect, I'm glad he doesn't find out, because that would have been more heartbreaking.
Ironic, though, because
especially because his family just gets, like, destroyed because of Light, because of the fact that Light is Kira and he's on the Kira investigation team. Like, Sayu gets kidnapped by Mello, and after that, apparently, she becomes, like, her mind has been, like, destroyed, and, like, she's in a wheelchair.
Kind of makes no sense, because she was fine on the helicopter.
Yeah.
She looked completely, like, stable in the helicopter, and then the next time we see her, she's in a wheelchair, and she looks, like, brain dead.
Yeah, she's been, like, so traumatized, and it's like, Light destroys his family, and it's just so... That just makes him just so much the more evil, that he can destroy his family and then go on to continue lying to them and not even care about them as people, but just as pawns in his game. And, like, there's this moment where Aizawa is thinking about, oh my god, is Light going to eventually convince his mother and daughter that his dad's death was justified because he went against Kira? It's like... God, Light is so despicable for what he puts his families through.
So on that subject, I was also reading a bit of Death Note Volume 13, aka How to Read, the guidebook that came out a little while back. And there's a part of the book where whoever's interviewing Oba and Obata gives them a couple of questions to have them answer, and one of the questions was that they were asked was, who is the most pitiful character in the entire series? And they both answer the Yagami family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also this quote about, like, where Oba is saying that Light is very evil, L is a little evil, and Soichiro is the only one who's good. And I think that you could say that Soichiro is probably the only character in the series where if he had got the Death Note in his hands, he would never use it. Ever.
No.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even touch it.
I mean, we saw, he does get the Death Note, he doesn't use it. He doesn't use it against Mello. He doesn't write his name down. So we know that. We have proof of that. Soichiro is the only person in this series who I think you could say would never be tempted to use the Death Note.
And even then, like, he said, like, if he writes it down, he's planning to die. He wants to die after he
I mean, the only way he would write that down is because of the 13-day rule and the fact that he would die later. Like, that is the only... If he knew that rule was not in place, even if he had to go through with it, he would just kill himself immediately later.
He doesn't want to live
could not live with the guilt of killing a person. He's just that pure.
Yeah, but I guess just moving... I was saying earlier, if it weren't for Matsuda, Soichiro would be probably my favorite character, but I have to be honest, Matsuda is kind of my favorite character throughout the entirety of the series.
Yeah, Matsuda is a great character in terms of his evolution, because at the beginning, he is the one member of the Kira Task Force who is willing to bring up the fact that Kira is making a change on the world, and, whether it is right to stop him. That doesn't stop him from joining the task force and trying to do the right thing and operate under the law. But Matsuda is also not one to ignore the fact that what Kira is doing and what Kira's intentions are might not be such a bad thing, and maybe the world could be a better place if Kira was around.
Yeah, because he constantly brings up the changes brought about by the existence of Kira. Like, hell, I think either he or Light mentioned near the end of the series that, like, the overall crime rate of the entire world, like, decreases by, like, 70% or some shit.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, and he mentions that after, like, Light's dad has died, in a time where, like, the task force is, like, very vulnerable and very angry. And he's like, guys, are we even doing the right thing, like, going after Kira at this point? I mean, Kira even helped us find out where Mello is and stuff. So, Matsuda is always open to the idea that maybe Kira is doing things for the sake of the greater good. But that doesn't stop him from helping out with the investigation and just being an earnest person. And Matsuda is always willing to, like, go the extra mile to help. Like, he goes off on his own to infiltrate the Yotsuba group, and he gains, even though it puts his life in danger and, like, it almost screws things up. The fact that he was able to do that, the fact that he was, able to get some valuable information out of that, he did contribute. He does contribute. Even though everyone throughout the entire series gives him shit for being an idiot, for saying stupid things, at the end of the day, Matsuda is probably one of the more inquisitive people, because he's always thinking about, like, what is right or wrong and pointing out injustices and flaws in people's logic. Like, towards the end, where Nier is wearing, like, L's mask, he's, like, saying, hey, this isn't fair if this guy's going to hide his identity even though he said he wanted to meet face-to-face to us. Like, Matsuda, I think he's actually the most, like, innocent in terms of, like, he has, like, this childlike optimism about the world.
Yeah.
So, he's always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. And, like, he's, the guy who becomes the most buddy-buddy with Ryuk, too. When, like, the rest of the investigation team becomes able to see Ryuk. So we get some fun moments with that as well. And he's just also a funny character because, he is such an earnest and likable person. And because, like, you can sympathize with him because people give a shit. But also because he makes some stupid mistakes and does some dumb things. And has some zealous things. You gotta love when he's, like, commenting on, Light's meetings with Takada and treating it like a soap opera.
Yeah, those are so
great. But it's also just so... and also he's, like, the only member of the investigation team who, right up until the end, never doubts Light. He never doubts that Light is innocent and is not Kira, when everyone else has. Like, he has such faith in the people around him. And
then it's all shattered.
That's what makes it so cathartic that Matsuda is the one to shoot Light. Because Matsuda is the one who is most betrayed. Matsuda truly trusted Light from the bottom of his heart. And he asked Light, once he's shooting them, with tears in his eyes, what was it all for? What did your dad die for? And Light is like, my dad died, so the world would be a better place for people like him. And Matsuda can immediately notice the contradictions in Light's arguments, and he's not fooled by what he's saying to him. And when, Light tries to write down, in blood the name of Nier, he, like, shoots him again. He's like, this guy is irredeemable. He has to die. And then eventually, he is pure enough that he stops himself, or, like, they get to him before he's able to go through it, but I don't know if he would be able to, like, really shoot Light, because he is also innocent in the sense I don't think he could take a life. Maybe with the temptation of the Death Note, but, like, just on his own, he couldn't do that.
Like, when Ryuk finally gives, like, the killing blow to Light, you can see, like, Amatsuda's face, he's, like, kind of horrified, he's feeling sorry for Light, so deep down, I don't think he would have been able to pull the trigger, like, because deep down, he still cares about Light.
Matsuda did have empathy when Light was dying, and he was, like, watching him. And, like, even a year later, Matsuda still hasn't been able to get over Light, and still has some fondness of him that he's trying to rationalize, like, that Nier was also duplicitous, and all these other things. But, like, at the end of the day, like, he still just can't get over the fact that Light betrayed him like that, and Light was Kira and did such horrible things to people he cared about, because Matsuda, again, he is the most trustful person, he's the most optimistic person, and, like, he sees both sides, but he also knows when people are full of shit. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm tearing up just thinking about him. Like, I was almost in tears when it's like, he shoots Light, but I just that look of betrayal on his face just hurts me so bad.
It's so emotional. Like, in the anime, too, whether it's dub or sub, like, when you see his face and hear, like, his shaking, trembling voice, it's just, like, heartbreaking. But it's also what makes that scene so cathartic, is that it is Matsuda, the middle ground, who thinks about both sides, and also thinks about the best of people. It's the fact that he is the one who shoots Light and who is asking him, what was this all for?
Yeah,
that's what makes it so
it's the one
satisfying.
Light least expects, because he thinks when he's going to write down the name, it's going to be Nier or one of his cronies that's going to, like, try to shoot him. But no, it's Matsuda, the person that he thought was the closest to his ideals.
Yeah.
Or really the person he thought was the dumbest.
That too.
That and the one he thought he could most convince to get to his side, because Matsuda had previously before stated that he was conflicted as to whether, Kira was right and stuff. So, again, that just adds another layer to why it was so satisfying that he was the one to mortally wound Light. But of course, even more satisfying was the fact that Ryuk wrote Light's name in the Death Note right in front of him, right as Light was begging him to kill everyone else. And Ryuk was like, you reached the end of your rope, Light. I was thinking you could get out of this one, but, oh well, you cured my boredom for a little while, but now it's come to an end. Remember, at the beginning, I said I would write your name the Death Note when this was all over. I would be the one to kill you. That time has come. Sorry. And, it's just... It's so... That is satisfying, because for the entire series, Light used Ryuk as, again, just another tool. Just someone he can use...
Which is pretty ballsy, considering that Ryuk is an actual death god.
And Ryuk could have killed him at any time.
He treats him like an idiot. He bosses him around. But, again, this is Light falling into this delusion that he is, God, and he has the authority of God, that he has, I think the fact that he was able to kill Rem didn't help that fact that, him thinking of himself, is above everyone in the world. But, no, throughout the entire thing, Ryuk was just enabling him. He was just letting Light do what he wants because he wanted to see what Light was going to go with everything when all was said and done. And then when Light is at the end of this rope, Ryuk, reminds him in a very chilling way that he was the one who had the power this whole time. He was the one who was letting Light do all these things. And he ultimately is the one who takes Light's life right in front of him. He can't do anything about it. And the 40 seconds just dwindle is all the way just screaming, please save me, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, and then the heart attack, and he dies, and he's no, damn it.
And from the very beginning, Ryuk says, I'm not your friend or your enemy, I'm just here to watch.
And Ryuk told him at the beginning, don't expect people who use the Death Note to be able to go to heaven and hell. And in the flashback in chapter 107, we realized there was a continuation of that, where Light was saying, oh, thanks for telling me that, Ryuk, because you've confirmed to me that there is no heaven and hell. And Ryuk is you're very perceptive, you're exactly right. There is no afterlife. Everyone goes to the same place where they die. And in the, rules of the Death Note that are, in, the volume pages, it says that the place people go to when they die is Mu, aka nothingness. They become nothing when they die. That there's nothing after that for human beings. So, Light thought of himself as a god, but in the end, when he dies, he is nothing. He is nothing. And everything that he did as Kira essentially is starting to revert. There are still some remnants of what he did. There are still a cult of people who, worship Kira. There is this sense that maybe one day all this will begin again. But Light Yagami's impact on the world, Light as a person, forgotten by the world. Yeah. He is nothing to anybody, except for the few people who remember him.
I think we can all agree, just while we're on the subject, that the ending to the actual ending of Death Note and the climax is amazing, right?
It is.
Yeah.
In the manga, I think it drags a little bit, because it's the entire climax, the entire final confrontation is chapters 101 through 107.
It's a whole volume.
Yeah, it's basically a whole volume. And a lot of it is explaining, of course, the very... It's not actually that complicated when you think about it. It's just they switched out the notebooks.
A lot of the time, Nier seems to just be repeating that he changed out the pages 5 times.
Yeah, they kind of over-explained that. You could simplify it, and it's actually way easier to understand.
Yeah.
Light knew that Nier was going to switch out the notebooks, so he had Mikami carry around a fake notebook, but he hid the real notebook away. But when Light lost communication with Mikami when Takada was killed, when Mikami was captured, Takada took... No, wait. Shit.
You got the names.
I got the names mixed up.
Yeah.
When Takada was captured, Mikami took matters into his own hands and got the real notebook. That caught the suspicions of Nier's agents. They figured it out, and then they switched out the pages in the real notebook, too. And it's pretty simple, actually.
Essentially, Mikami fucked everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would have been even more satisfying if Light himself was the person who fucked things up, but the fact that Light's grand plan was, disrupted by, the trust he placed in Mikami and, stuff that he couldn't control is also satisfying in its own right.
I think at the end of the day, it is Light's fault, though, because, he was in this mentality that, Nier is an inferior L, which he is an inferior L.
Yeah, that's true. He underestimated
Nier. Underestimated L, and then... He knew that Mikami's habits. He knew that he doesn't have to tell Mikami to do everything. Mikami's going to take his own volition on things.
Yeah, he underestimated Mikami as well. He underestimated Mikami's devotion to him.
Yeah, he underestimated Mikami's devotion, and he underestimated Nier's abilities as kind of a replacement L.
Yeah. But in the end, yes, it is very satisfying to see Light finally be brought down. And again, all those elements of the people involved, particularly Matsuda and Ryo, just make it so all the more satisfying. And I just love, the expression, his dying expression, which is just so cold and lifeless and, repugnant, too. He looks hideous. He looks like the monster he is, honestly.
And then that double-page spread of just, complete black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think really finishes off that chapter really nicely.
But to speak about the differences between the ending in the anime and manga, because this is always been very interesting to me. You've seen the anime, right, Colton?
Yeah, I've seen all of it.
So, in the ending of the anime is very different because Light escapes the warehouse. And then he, runs through the street for a while, I guess, and, he passes, a vision of his younger self, what he could have been, I guess, and then he, dies on top of a staircase while he sees a vision of L, where Light is, flowing down on him, and it's see, the anime portrays the death of Light as more tragic than in the manga. In the manga, it was, it seemed, deserved it and just. The framing of Light's death is completely different. Light dies in a more dignified, manner in the anime. Whereas in the manga, he dies, begging for his life right up into the last minute, and then dies with just this repugnant expression. In the anime, he dies with, this, pretty boy. He slowly closes his eyes, his light is flickering down on him.
Can't have our pretty boy look ugly at the end.
The spirit of L is looking down on him. Again, it's the anime presents this idea that Light was more of a martyr, that Light was more tragic, which I think confuses the messages and is not the interpretation you get.
No,
the original manga.
Light dies like a bitch.
The manga makes no qualms. It does not confuse the idea that Light is ever a good person. No, the manga shows that Light died as, he acted with the Death Note. Despicably.
That's some of my favorite parts of the climax is where, you could tell that just, everything's falling apart and Light just, flails all about, trying to run away, and he falls to the ground at one point, and it's just, is cornered like the rat he is. Yeah. And it's just,
it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic fall for grace.
It is cathartically pathetic.
This is another major change from in the anime. So in the manga, Mikami sees Light flailing around. He sees Light desperately flinging at any possibility to get out of this. And Light is asking Mikami for help, and Mikami's like, "You're no god. You're scum." In the manga, Mikami, sees Light for who he really is. In the anime, Mikami looks at Light and he, tears up. He goes insane because his god is, dying. And he kills himself to help Light escape. He, cuts his neck open so, it sprays blood and distracts, distracts all the people in the warehouse so Light can, escape. I mean, so, that's another huge difference that again, characterizes, how you're supposed to see Light at the end of the series differently between the anime and manga. And of course, the anime does not contain any of chapter 108, which, questions, whether Nier himself was moral, whether another Kira is going to arise again, and, what the long-lasting implications of Kira's legacy will be. The entirety of Chapter 8 is not in the anime.
So the anime has, no epilogue?
No.
It has no epilogue.
It is very heavily implied, as far as I can remember, that Misa kills herself at the end of the anime, I think.
Which is a little confusing, because Misa has no memories of, Light as Kira.
Well, no, but point. She states very clearly at some point in the manga that, she doesn't want to live without Light.
Yeah, but how does she know? Because the way the anime frames it is that all of this is happening at the same time Light is dying. Does she know that Light is dead at that point?
That's fair.
Again,
yeah.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
So it's, like, very plausible that she killed herself, but, like, why she killed herself, like, at that same moment that Light
at that moment,
himself,
okay,
that is confusing.
I can
That framing was very questionable.
Yeah, okay.
Even after that, it's not like they ever reveal that Light was Kira to the public, so...
No, they don't. Yeah. And Misa is completely in the dark about all this at this point.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that's, like, very strangely absent from the ending of the manga is that we don't know what happens to Misa at the end. She's not in the final chapter at all. Like, I thought that one girl who was in the robes who puts, like, the candle in, in the gathering of Kira worshippers could be Misa, but
I thought that was Misa.
But when I keep referencing it back, it actually does not look that much like Misa. I just think it's just...
No, Oba and Obata have confirmed that themselves that it's not Misa, so...
It's not Misa?
No, so it's like, we don't know at all what happens to Misa at the end of the series. She just completely forgot about it. Like, at the end of the series, like, I think, like, Oba and Obata just... did not know what to do with her when she lost her, like, memories of the Kira killings again. So they tried to do something with her, with having her have a rivalry with Takada. But then at some point, like, they basically kind of stay flat out that Nier is trying to get all the people who aren't necessary out of the way by imprisoning, like, Misa and Mogi at one point. So, yeah, I think that was Oba, like, subtly saying, I just need to get Misa out of here.
I mean, I think it would have been good to at least, like, maybe, like, just have, like, a banner or something in the background, like, of Misa's career or something, or, like, doing something.
I want to know what happened to her, because, like, she is a main character in the series. She is the female lead, and she just does not get any closure to her story. Yeah. And for me, like, I really thought it would be satisfying if Misa, did get some comeuppance on Light. If she did get, like, she did do something to punish Light for all the horrible things that he did to her when he was using her and, like, manipulating her. But, that just never happens, which to me is, like, the most unsatisfying thing about Misa's character. Like, there is this, like, meme in the fandom that Misa is, like, this terrible character.
She's really not that bad,
upon rereading that, no, I don't think she's really that bad. I mean, you could argue that she's morally, she can be a worse character because she, has no ideals upon which she is committing murders. She's just doing it to get the attention of Kira, and she's willing to kill other girls that, Light gets close to out of spite and jealousy. But, like, as a character in of herself, like, she might not be as smart as Light and Elle, but she can hold her own, and she has some wit about her.
Yeah.
And she also, in some respect, I do find the fact that she is so devoted to Light endearing in the same way I find Matsuda's, like, devotion to Light endearing, but unlike Matsuda, she does not get that chance to pay back Light. So she does not get that chance to get her, just desserts, to, like, punish Light for what he did to her. And to me, that's the most satisfying aspect about her character. I mean, I think people find Misa annoying because she dotes on Light so much. I think especially in the anime, in both dub and sub, she has a particularly annoying voice. And there are some, like, moments where you're like, no, don't do this, don't trust this guy. But throughout the entire manga, as I was reading it, I had a lot of sympathy for her because she was in such a terrible position, but she just didn't realize it. And, like, throughout the entire manga, even though I knew she would not get, like, that revenge, I was just wishing to myself, man, I wish Misa would see the light about Light. I wish Misa would figure out this guy is a horrible person who is just using her and would do something to get her revenge on him for that.
He doesn't love you, Misa. Just stab the bastard.
I feel like she wouldn't care if Light didn't love her back, because that's just kind of her character. She just loves Light no matter what.
She does say that, like, she's okay with, like, using her at one point, but, like, that was, like, a moment of desperation. But, like, especially during, like, in the final arc, she was growing increasingly, like, resentful about Light meeting with Takada. I feel like just something could have pushed her over the edge to, like, completely turning on Light, to realizing, you know what, screw Light, you've used me, I'm not gonna take this anymore. I wish there was just something, there was some evolution for, like, just finally realizing, you know what, this guy's bad for me, this guy has always been bad for me, and fuck you, Light.
Okay. Here's the thing. I want to talk about Misa a little bit, because, like, I do agree that I feel like the whole notion that Misa is a bad character, like, I don't agree with that. But I also don't think she's an amazing character either. Like, I don't think she's necessarily... I don't want to say I don't think she's a good character, but, like, she's not really, like... I don't know. She's honestly one of my least favorite characters, because to me, I feel like personally Misa was kind of a means to an end. Like, I don't know, I feel weird calling, because I really do feel like she just ended up being a tool. But also I can't fault her for that, because, like, you know, it's like you said, she was okay with being used by Light. That was of her own volition, so I can't give her too much shit for that. But it's like, yeah, I don't think she's a terrible character like everyone is, because I was kind of surprised, like, you know, there are moments where she can kind of sort of fend for herself and think for herself. She is not as smart as Light, but, you know, even Light is kind of surprised at some of the some of the stuff she's pulled off in trying to basically trying to keep her identity as the second Kira early on a secret, and how careful she is in trying to find Light. Even I was kind of shocked, like, oh, I don't remember her doing any of this, because, you know, I used to be kind of in that party of, oh yeah, Misa's a terrible character, she's dumb, huh, when, again, she's not as smart as Light, but, you know, she's smart enough to be able to fend for herself, which I do appreciate, but, again, I don't think she's a terrible character, but I think she could have been a better character, though, personally.
She found out Light's identity before he found out hers. In fact, who knows when he would have been able to find out her identity without actually being able to meet her. But she was able to. Yeah. She is very resourceful. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can see what you're saying about, you know, Misa ultimately just being a tool for the series. Like, her having the Shinigami eyes just being another, like, tool for Light to use. But I take issue just with the way Oba wrote her into that role. More so with her characterization in itself. Because there are just so many snippets, especially in the Yotsuba arc, that show the promise of a character that could be more interesting, that could be given more agency of her own and given a better character arc, but Oba just does not take it in that direction. And quite frankly, I don't think Oba writes very good female characters.
No,
that's
I don't think so either.
Of Olive series, but like reading Death Note, it just particularly bothers me, like the way he characterizes his female characters, and also like a lot of the statements characters make about women in general in the series. God, yeah. Like, women can't resist the word fate.
Well, see, like, I took issue with some of that stuff too, but I equate that to just Light being an asshole.
Except it's not just Light. It's other characters in the series too make comments about, like, women having, like, weaker hearts or being easily fooled and stuff.
Like, the first one that really bothered me was Ray Penber's fiance, the FBI agent that Light kills. Like, in the first conversation between, like, Ray and, like, his wife, Ray's wife is like, hey, maybe you should look more into this Light guy. And Ray's like, immediately, stop talking about the case. You're a housewife now. Do housewife things.
What the hell? She's making astute observations. Just because she's not a member of the FBI anymore, why can't she help you with this case?
Oh, okay, hold on.
What's the danger? No, Coach, and it's indefensible. I don't know how you're trying to defend this. She is not in danger at that point. There's nothing wrong with her giving her opinions on the case.
Fair enough.
There's no reason for him to ignore her opinions, to not put them into consideration.
That's fair.
At all. He just completely shut it down, saying, no, your opinions don't matter. I don't give a shit about you or your opinions. You're a housewife now. Act like a housewife. Get back in the kitchen. That's literally
I didn't take it like
attitude.
That. See, I personally...
That is the attitude that he takes in that scene. It makes no sense. He does not listen to her at all. He just says, you're a housewife now, you're not a member of the FBI, don't get involved. What? Just telling her opinion? What the hell? She could help you with this case. It does not make any sense at all. It's just one of those examples of just like this very antiquated view on women's roles and like the characterizing women that just really bugs me about Oba's writing.
Well, let me make my point real quick. I do agree that I don't really care for a lot of the female characters in Death Note either. I think a lot of them, unfortunately, are, especially Misa, in my opinion, are kind of a means to an end, and are kind of just used to move the plot along. But so the thing is with especially with Light in particular, like, you know, there are moments where, like, you know, when Light is trying to get himself out of a situation, like during with Naomi, Penber's wife, and with him trying to basically get rid of Naomi, you know, he's constantly trying to come up with ways to try to keep her away from the task force early on. And, you know, at one point he's like, oh, well, she's a woman. I could just like force my way onto her or whatever, or use force against her. And like comments like that, I think, are pretty despicable. But I also feel like, I don't know, because I feel like a lot of the like comments on women, the fact that most of them come from Light, I feel like doesn't bother me, because we know that Light's a fucking asshole, and he does.
Yeah, but it'd be one thing if it was just Light. It's not just Light.
It's
Again,
not just Light,
great
but
member. It's other members. Even L makes a comment.
L does it. Nier does it. A few of the other agents do it. It's like kind of a common thing.
It's not just Light. If it was just Light, I would be totally fine with that, because that would be like his own characterization. But it seems to not just be Light. It seems to be the perspective of most of the characters in the manga who make comments about women. It seems to be, from experience with Segumi Oba's other works, like Bakuman, I know that this is a common thing in all of his, like, writing.
Yeah, like,
Bakuman,
Bakuman,
his writing of women, his perspective on women is just really sexist. Flat out.
So
sorry.
Here's another thing I do want to bring up while we're on this subject. So another tidbit that Oba mentions in the How to Read volume is that the entirety of the existence of that scene where Takada and Misa have dinner together, Oba literally created that scene just because he thought it would be funny. Like, it wasn't like to move the plot along at all. It wasn't to like develop the characters. He just thought, it'd just be funny if these two girls would like eat together and like fight over Light or whatever.
It kind of just felt random to me, like the whole Takada Misa thing.
Great.
Like the whole Takada Misa thing, though, it just feels kind of like it's brought out of nowhere.
Yeah,
like
honestly,
like,
it doesn't lead to anywhere really.
No, it doesn't.
Like, Light mentions at one point that, like,
and it could, like I said before, you know, you could have had Misa, you know, get so frustrated with Light that she turns on him, but they don't go in that direction.
But, like, Light mentioned at one point that, like, yeah, Misa's working for Takada's, like, TV network now. But they never even show them their initial interaction. We just suddenly go to, oh, hey, they must have met each other.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, they're now having dinner.
We don't see how their bad blood formed, like, before. We just get jumped right in after, you know, Takada has, you know, become Light's go-between.
Yeah, so there's really no reason for this rivalry other than, Misa's just very protective of Light, and she just wants him all to herself. Like, it's not, it doesn't, like, move the story along at all. It's like Oba said, it was literally there just for comedy.
Oba doesn't know how to write female characters.
No. You know, the worst part about Takada, more I think about it, is that he's like, she's like the prototype for, the character who's like Tagaki's rival, that had a crush on him in Bakuman. I forget her name. Yeah. But, like, she was, like, the worst character in Bakuman. And it's, like, you can look back at Takada and see, okay, this is, like, a prototype to that character.
Yeah, the one positive
design-wise, in terms of, like, her personality, like, she's not antagonistic to Light. But, like, in terms of, like, being, like, an honor student who, like, is very full of herself, like, yeah, I see where a lot of similarities. So that I was like, oh god, this is where that character evolved from. But, you know, going back to Naomi Misora, I think my least favorite part in the entire manga is everything involving her, because it goes nowhere and it adds nothing to the series. And she herself could have been a really cool character. There's a great setup for her character. She wants to avenge a former FBI agent who wants to avenge the death of her fiancé killed by Kira, going off on her own to investigate the case. Great concept. Could have been a great supporting character, last way longer. She gets killed
and throws it in the trash.
She gets killed really quickly without contributing anything, finding out any new information to the case that could help Elle or move the story along. And she gets killed because Light tricks her using really, again, in Tsugumi Oba's sexist, writing that, women can be tricked by, Light using the words, fate and destiny and stuff, even though her character should be way above being tricked by that, because she is an FBI agent. She's
someone who's worked with Elle before,
smart,
too.
Critical thinker. It doesn't make sense that she could be tricked like that, or just believe, this high school student, for some reason, is a member of the team. Even if he has a connection to the chief of the NPA, she should have been a little more skeptical of that. But no, I think that Tsugumi Oba just felt that, oh, you know what, I don't know where I'm going with this character. I'll just kill her off, whatever. But the worst part about that is that it just adds nothing. They never find her body. Elle never learns anything from the disappearance of Naomi Misora. It doesn't add anything to his investigation of the case. You can remove the entire part involving her, all those chapters from the series, and you miss nothing, because it added nothing. And that really frustrated me, because she could have been a good character. She could have added to the story, even if did trick her and kill her in the end. She could have done more. She could have contributed. There could have been more that you could have done her, but I guess Oba didn't want to write an interesting female character for once.
At the very least, the female characters in Death Note have more personality than the female characters in Platinum End.
That's the one thing you can give it. But that's actually that does not speak well of Oba, because that means he's devolved over the years.
He's getting worse at writing female characters. He's become
worse after 15 years.
Saki is literally the blandest piece of shit I've seen in a while in manga.
See, this is not the only reason where I can't say Tsugumi Oba is one of my favorite mangaka, but his writing of women is just one of the reasons where I can never say that I love, he is one of my favorite mangaka. Takashi Obata, he's one of my favorite mangaka, he's one of my favorite
Obata has done nothing wrong. Obata is a blessing. He
makes great stories about, mind games and, battles of wits. I enjoy, I love Death Note, I love Bakuman, but gosh, this aspect of his writing is just so bad, so frustrating, and I hate it. I just absolutely hate it. So, for all of you people who say that the worst part about Death Note is the entire second half with Nier and Mello, no, the worst part is all this stuff involving Naomi Misora, because it's absolutely unnecessary, and it's absolutely frustrating waste of potential.
So actually,
Nier is still a shitty character, though.
Well, here, can we actually let's go on to the second half of Death Note, because that was something I was really interested in revisiting upon my reread in particular. Was that was sort of a meme for a long time too, and it probably still is. But the notion that basically everything after Elle dies is basically the worst part of Death Note, which after revisiting it, I don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is, but there is a part of me that feels like something there is lacking, and I have a really hard time trying to figure out what that is. I don't know if it's like VLord was mentioning. I feel like a lot of Death Note and a lot of the monologues and shit in general could probably be streamlined, but I think the only reason that probably it was because Oba wanted to the end point for Death Note, the fact that it ends at 108 chapters was intentional. That was something he was striving for from almost the beginning, because it has something to do with Buddhism or something. I'm not very well versed in that kind of thing.
108 I think sins of Buddhism or something.
Something like that, yeah. Desires, something like that.
Yeah, I know that from Saint Seiya. Virgo Shaka has the 108 beads of destiny or something. He uses it in one of the best fights in the series.
So yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to interrupt the podcast here for just a second. to basically clear up some stuff here, because when I made that claim about Oba wanting to end Death Note at 108 chapters from the beginning, I was basically misremembering some information that I had researched before we recorded this discussion. So I just want to correct myself here real quick. So Oba, in Death Note Volume 13, How to Read, is asked when did he decide to end the series at 108 chapters. And Oba says, quote, "When I decided how to end it, I also came up with the idea of ending it at chapter 108. I then kept that in mind when creating the thumbnails. So from around the time that Takeda reappeared, the plot and chapter numbers were already set. I had also already plotted out the Yellow Box Warehouse scene, so it was really difficult to edit exactly at 108 chapters. The number represents the 108th earthly desires in Buddhism." So that last part there we kind of got right in the discussion, but again, I just wanted to come in here and make sure that I corrected myself, saying, "Oh yeah, he planned this all from the beginning." Which, by the way, if you want to find out more about Oba and Obata's like creative process with creating Death Note week to week, I really suggest picking that up. Like it's really informative, and I really learned a lot about their process during Death Note before this podcast. So yeah, essentially, yeah, I just wanted to come on and correct myself. So essentially, yeah, if Oba had decided when he wanted to end the series around Takeda's reappearance, that would have meant that he would have decided that around chapter 85 or so, which then, yeah, he had that particular aspect of the series planned out about 24 chapters ahead of time. So that's not terribly too terribly in advanced. But yeah, just really just wanted to come in here and correct myself on that. I personally don't like spreading misinformation, if I can help it. So hopefully everybody learned something new today. And hopefully I'll be able to keep my facts straight in the future and keep myself a bit more organized. Now back to the show.
My big problem with the second half of Death Note is that it seemed like Oba was in this mentality that he has to continue with some sort of light VL conflict.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have to bring in these pretty much disciples of L to fill in the void of L. Which, I was telling this to Sid yesterday when I started reading the second half, that you really don't need another L.
Yeah.
There is no point to having another L. Like, what the Yotsuba arc showed me was that this series can still be interesting without it being just solely Kira versus L. Give the Death Note to someone else and have them have to, take on Light. Like, the one thing I really liked about the second half was when Mello got the Death Note, and then it became like a Death Note v Death Note fight between Light and Mello. Mm-hmm. That was cool. But then they kind of throw that away after, Light's dad dies.
Yeah, to me, it would have been more interesting to take the series in a direction that Light was competing with another Death Note owner who had completely opposite ideals of him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been way more interesting than trying to just do L again. And that's, unfortunately, to me, the biggest weakness of the Nier stuff, is that Nier is just L again, but he's not as compelling, because he's just like some kid who plays with toys. And he just, aside from that, there's nothing that really distinguishes him or makes him more endearing than L. Because L, we got a lot of time and a lot of build-up before we actually ever saw his face. We kind of got a sense of why he was so reclusive because of his great character design and, his habits that show that, he's like a socially, awkward kind of guy. He's not comfortable in public. The reason he hides himself is not just to preserve, his anonymity to protect himself, but also because, he is just awkward around people in general. And, he has, interesting quirks about him. He has a sense of humor, which Nier doesn't have. Nier is just, has this shit-eating grin that, when he outsmarts Light. But L will just make a joke. L will just, have some fun. Or, he's not always, trying to be sneaky. I mean, he is often. But L does have some moments of humanity to him. Like the moment where he's oh, you shouldn't take my assessment of this case so seriously because I can be wrong. And then, later he's questioned about it and said, I was joking. He makes jokes. L has way more character, but Nier, we just don't get much out of him. And the worst part, and to me the most disappointing part, is that they build up Nier and Mello as L's successors, but never do we go into what that means. Never do we learn what the exact relationship between L and Nier and Mello was. We get no flashbacks. We don't know what L means to Nier and Mello. We don't know, why they're so devoted to him, why they idolize him. We know L was this, great detective and stuff, but why do Nier and Mello, really love him that much? Why are they trying to follow in his footsteps? We don't get that. It's just, there's this easy way to give them a personal motivation by just going into why they idolize L. But we never get the story there. We never really understand the significance of Whammy's house and training successors for L. We don't really even get the sense of what that means, whether L is this detective that has always existed for a long time and the title gets passed down. We can interpret that from the fact that by the end of the series, the title of L has been given to Nier after, also being passed on to Light, but that was not something that L had control of. But, that there's just so much, to me, Nier is just not interesting because we just don't get a sense of what his personal conviction is. Yeah. Outside of just being a copy of what, L wanted to do.
He's really just L without L's personality, honestly.
Yeah, the only problem I have with Nier is that even, him jumping to the conclusion that L is Kira just feels so flawed.
Yeah, he makes a baseless assumptions, really. L takes a long time to figure things out because he's, doing constant prodding. And, L will make, will operate under an assumption to try and find out more, but Nier will just make an assumption and accept that as fact.
Yeah, and some assumptions are just okay, L thought that was true, therefore it must be true. It's
Nier, once Nier decides that L is Kira, that's it. He accepts that as fact, and everything else in terms of investigation on his side just goes along on that model. But L, right until the end, never 100% operates under the assumption that Light is Kira. He strongly suspects it. He, up until the end, suspects it really strongly, but never is he 100% closed off to the ideas that other people could be Kira. Yeah. And he is willing to question himself and admit that he is wrong at certain points as well. Nier, never. Nier is just focused on this one idea, and that's it. That's all he operates on. It just feels really convenient. I mean, obviously, we as the reader, we as the audience know that Light is Kira, right? We know that. So, of course, we want to see, Nier figure that out, right? But, It's not satisfying when Nier comes to that assumption. And it's not, satisfying to see Nier just accept that as fact and then just go onwards, into trying to prove that without, any other complications, he's thinking about or anything else, popping up. No other conflicts, pop up afterwards that complicate the case. It's just that game of wits between Nier and Light. When, towards the end of the battle between Light and L, they had to contend with the Yotsuba group and other, factors involved. So there was just more going on. Yeah, so Nier is a disappointing, final boss as the one to bring Light to justice.
I think... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you can go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the thing that kind of gets me about the second half of Death Note is that it's a lot of... It's really just to me, it's a lot of monologuing on both sides, on both Light and Nier's side. And it's what kills me is that I wouldn't mind it so much if it weren't for the fact that most of the time, one side will make a move, and then the other side will basically figure out what next move they're going to make, but I don't give a shit about that because I already know what's going on both sides. So basically, like Nier will have all these like internal monologues about what Kira or Light or L or whoever what their next move is going to be or how they're going to proceed. But like during my reread, I ended up kind of skimming through a lot of that because it's like, okay, like I saw all this. Like I don't care. I don't care about trying to read. I don't want to read like 5 paragraphs or pages or whatever about all the stuff that you think he's going to do when I already saw that Light did it.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff's also like very repetitive. Like
it is. Yeah.
Nier or Light would just like say the same things over and over again.
Yeah,
like I know people complain about like Togashi in Hunter x Hunter doing a lot with like over explaining stuff, but I feel Oba kind of does it worse in here because like. He's repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Togashi will say it once, and then he expects you to remember it. He's not gonna handhold you and repeat it like 50 times.
Right. Togashi, like, will go on long spells of exposition, but once that's out and done with, that's done with. You're not gonna get that repeated to you. But with the Nier and Mellow stuff, like, mostly with Nier and Light's monologues, like, you're gonna get the same information again and again, just rephrased in different ways. And going back to Light versus L, the original L, like, you know, that, there was never any of that, really. Like, you would get one focus on one perspective, and then you would be surprised by the other person's move. Like, you never really know what L is thinking in the first couple volumes of Death Note, because it's framed from Light's perspective trying to figure out what L is doing. And then during the confrontations between Light and L, the early ones, like, you're surprised when L throws a curveball and, like, gets Light to, like, mess up.
It never feels like L or Light is thinking the same idea twice.
Same thing later in the Yotsuba group arc. You don't know what Light is really planning. So you go through the entire arc trying to figure out what Light's game is, and then at the end, you get the big reveal. And that's surprising, that's satisfying.
Yeah.
But again, you just don't get that tease. You don't get that mystery in the Nier stuff.
Yeah. Like, I was going to say, especially with a lot of, like, just kind of going back to the Yotsuba stuff, like, near the end of that arc, right, when everything starts to kind of fall into place with Light, even I was kind of shocked at how, like, you know, Light factors in Rem and her feelings towards, like, because there's this whole thing where, like, you know, if a Shinigami, writes a name down in the Death Note, before their time, or like basically out of like some kind of feelings for them, like they end up dying
if they try to extend their lifespan.
Exactly, yeah. And like it's really surprising to see how Light factors in all of that and really like puts Rem in this difficult position where like no matter what she does, she's gonna die. So like a lot of that was really satisfying, and I agree that, you know, overall the battle between Light and L, I think, is aside from like the very last volume of Death Note where Light ends up eating shit, you know, that entire fight between L and Light is always interesting to read and is always like you want to see where that goes. Really, the only thing that kept me from the only thing that kept me reading through the second half was basically that promise of Light eating shit in the end. Like that's really the kind of the driving force with reading the rest of the series. Is you like, I don't know, for some people it might be different, but for me it was, I want to see Light lose.
I don't know, for me, like, I legitimately love the stuff with Mello, because I found Mello, like, far more compelling than Nier, who's just a piece of shit.
Yeah, I think the first, like, 2 volumes of the arc are really good because it focuses on Mello, and Mello goes through these insane lengths to get the Death Note that really, like, pushes personal stakes onto Light and, of course, Soichiro. And then, again, it becomes very interesting because now we have 2 competing, like, sides that have Death Notes. And Mello's side is using it for their own personal gain, too. And, like, for me, I think Mello would have been just the more interesting character for, like, to go up against.
Yeah, like, I feel like, Mello should have just been the primary villain of the second half. Like, just get rid of Nier. We don't need a complete L copycat.
Well, actually, I kind of feel a bit differently on that, where I do agree that I think Mello should have been the primary villain. I think what gets me about the second half is that there's a clear rivalry between Mello and Nier, which I think could be interesting, but
But it's not focused on.
Yeah, it gets wasted. I mean,
it's not focused on, but it does. In a way, it does kind of. I don't know. What gets me about it is that like it doesn't get the spotlight it deserves, which I think is a shame. But like, I guess it does kind of in a way, it sort of leads to Light's downfall at the end. Like, I really feel like. I mean, I agree that Nier isn't really that great of a character, but I do feel strongly in that I think you kind of do need both characters to function with the rest of the story, but I also do agree that Nier probably shouldn't have been the primary focus, though.
Like, for me, like, I kind of get that in the context of how it ends up ending, because by the end, like, Nier's like, yes, both of us are technically inferior L's, but together, me and Mello are superior to L. Because they are, like, the absolutes of the different aspects of L.
Yeah,
like,
by
working
that's together,
good.
They could do what L couldn't.
Like, one other problem I also have is that Mello kind of feels like he's shafted in the final few volumes.
He
really is.
He goes a long time before showing up again. I feel like, you know, because Oba and Obata were, like, so dead set on ending it at 108 chapters, like, they dragged out certain elements that they later realized that they wouldn't be able to resolve. And then they had all these other plot threads that they, you know, realized they had to, like, you know, finish. So there is kind of a part of, like, the final 2 volumes which feels very rushed. Like, Oba and Obata are remembering all these things that they had set up before, and they just try to streamline it and condense it in order to get to the end.
Yeah, and then when Mello comes back, his death is just kind of disappointing.
It is disappointing. It's not very big. Like, Takada just, like, kills it with pages of the Death Note, and that's it.
Like, he was the best part of that arc, and it just feels like he dies so easily. Like, he was acting so smart before. Like, he wasn't, like, letting anyone get close to him or, like, pretty much get anywhere near a Death Note that could kill him. But now, he's just being careless, and he can, like, let people see his face through, like, the helmet that he's wearing, and then he dies.
I think they found out his name too easily. I mean, I think they could have still had Soichiro take the eyes and learn Mello's name, but I think that they could have, like, had him die before he could tell, like, Mello's name.
My other problem, though, is that, like, Mello knows that they have his name. Yeah. Why isn't he wearing, like, a helmet that actually covers his face fully? Because that's how, like, Takada was able to, like, write it down, because, like, she could see his face through the, like, visor.
Yeah, or use a voice modulator.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, we've seen that Mello he's, like, reckless at times, but he's still intelligent. Why is he being so careless here?
And the only justification is that Oba needed to kill him off in order for the ending to work.
Which is,
yeah.
But guys, do you want to know who the worst character in all of Death Note is? Like, for real?
Who?
Matt.
He doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
Wait, who?
But guys, he's the third smartest L candidate at Whammy's house. That means something, right?
He is?
Yeah, they mentioned that.
Okay.
Wait, who is this character?
I don't even remember
exactly. That's my point. He was the guy who was helping Mello tail a lot of the.
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
Oh.
It's just that he just shows up in the story.
Do they ever mention that he's like the third?
I don't remember that.
They do mention. They do.
I don't remember that.
But whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care about that character because he's just like a sidekick to Mello. He doesn't have any like development or anything, so he can't frustrate me. Like,
it frustrates me because like his design.
Because, like, what frustrates me is a character like Naomi Misura, who gets, like, a lot of focus on, but then is wasted. Like, Matt never gets that much focus. Matt just, like, helps Mello out.
I just assumed Matt was, like, a random, like, mafia crony.
Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, he's a wasted character, but, like, I don't have any...
My favorite parts of Manga Mavericks... My favorite parts of any Manga Mavericks episode are where I try to make a point, and I know Sid is not going to stop, so I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to let him tire himself out.
Well, what's your point about Matt?
Oh, no, I was really just being a dick, but see, here, my thing is, like, it kind of surprises me that, like, Obata and Oba introduce this character who his design is way too like specific and well done for him to just be like this throwaway character. Like it's kind of a shame because his design, while it's not amazing, like, it doesn't look like a background character design. It doesn't look like
it looks like
it looks pretty
it looks like Matt's gonna be like some like special guy. He doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but like he's just a guy who plays video games and he helps Mello
and wants to watch Misa do her random shit.
Yeah, like his character felt like a total waste. Like, I don't know why he was really around other than to help Mello, but whatever. He's actually the worst character in Death Note because he just wasn't. I don't know.
Doesn't he die by just getting like shot by cops?
Yeah, he's like,
no, he doesn't get shot by cops. He gets shot by Kira fanatics.
Okay, yeah. That's how unmemorable it was, because I read that like 2 hours ago.
Yeah, cause he's literally like, okay guys, I'm gonna do this thing. No, then he just gets shot. Like, he's such a waste of a character, and it's frustrating.
Well, there are a lot of wasted characters. Like, I think everyone on, like, Nier's team could have been done so much more with too, but they're just, there for Nier to use. I mean, especially with Hal Lindner and her connection with Mello, that could have gone in way more interesting directions, but it's just ultimately a means for Mello to get information from Nier.
It's just like, oh, she was the rat in the whatever the fuck they were.
No, I don't think she was the rat.
Wasn't she?
No, she wasn't the rat. Like, later Mello contacted her for the same reasons Nier speculated, and
okay.
And that's how
I thought it was very heavily implied that like they had some sort of relationship of some kind. I thought it was anyway.
I don't think so.
I think
that Hal might have developed some feelings for Mello, but I don't think they didn't go into it deeply enough to really figure out anything more deeply than
I don't know.
What was presented.
Even if I were being held at gunpoint, I'd still I wouldn't be. If I weren't in a relationship with a person, I wouldn't be okay with them just showing up in my shower while I'm naked. I don't know. It's just,
I think that was just
Hal knows what Mello
like,
really wants, and she knows that Mello isn't going to try anything.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
It's just her way of like just acting coy and just trying to test Mello's patience to see what move he makes.
Also, Oba just being really bad at writing female characters.
Yeah, and trying to squeeze in a fan service scene.
Which honestly, the fan service in this really isn't bad at all.
Yeah, there isn't that much.
That's because the series in general is mostly a sausage fest, anyways.
Yeah.
But I feel like we agree that like the second half of Death Note isn't like as bad as everyone says it is. Like, I feel like that's overblown, but I also feel like we're all in agreement that like there are problems with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. I just think there's a lot of wasted opportunities, and I think that Nier is just not a compelling foil for Light in the same way L is, and Mello could have been much more compelling if they had just done more with him.
It just really wasn't the direction that the series should have gone in.
Because everybody likes to say that, like, oh, Death Note only continued because of, like, pressure from the editing staff or whatever, which, as far as I can tell, isn't true.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I don't think that, maybe, I mean, did they say from the beginning, from the very first chapter, they had planned it out to be 108 chapters?
I don't know from the very first chapter, but, like, that was, like, that was, I don't know, I'd have to look. I want to say it was from the beginning, but I guess I don't really remember for sure.
Well, at some point they got a cool idea to do that, so then they decide, we're running out of things to do to complicate the Light L situation, so let's kill L off and just introduce a new L. But instead of doing L again, they should have just gone in a different direction. Like I said, another character who gets a Death Note that has completely opposite ideals from Light, and Light has to try and, take that person out, while you could still have, like, a successor to L on the sidelines also trying to figure out, like, the true Kira, but, also have him operate in a different manner to L, like Mello was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I read in the How to Read volume, it didn't seem like the series was intended to end from the start with the end of Light versus Kira. Like Obata had mentioned, or Oba, I should say. By the way, their last names are so confusing.
Yeah, I used to get them confused all the time.
Like, I hate that so much, but whatever.
Yeah, I think I've gotten used to seeing Obata's like name more though, since he does like do a lot more works with other people. So, like, I've gotten used to identifying, okay, Obata, he's the artist. Oba, he's the writer who is shitty at writing female characters.
Yeah.
From the interviews I had read in How to Read, like, it seemed like to me that, like, they weren't like forced to continue the story from a point they didn't want to. It seemed like to me that like, because they were talking about how they like, one of their ideas for the ending of the series was to end after L died, but it just didn't seem like it. From what I could tell, it just seems like they had this idea, but maybe they got to it sooner than they wanted to, because Obata also mentions that like, because him and Oba and Obata constantly talk about how much Obata actually plans out his story. And from what I could tell, like, Obata constantly gives Oba shit because, Obata is, like, legitimately wondering, like, okay, how much have you had this planned? Like, how much did you have planned in the beginning? And Obata was like, oh, I had, like, 3 chapters planned. And Obata's kind of in, like, disbelief, like, there's no way you didn't have, like, all this planned from the beginning. And Obata's like, no, I mostly made it up as I went along, essentially. And it's like...
Obata's having this dialogue with himself?
I'm sorry. Whatever. No, but that's basically the point I'm trying to get to is that, like, Obata, god damn it, I keep doing it. Oba, the writer, I'll just call him the writer. The writer clearly didn't have a lot of this plan from the beginning. Like, he was clearly making up a lot of this as he went along, aside from, like, basically he made sure that everything stayed consistent within, like, as far as, like, the Death Note rules go and whatnot. But, yeah, he was really making it up a lot as he went along. Like it's clear that he didn't have the entire story planned out from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can definitely tell that from, like, how certain plot points, go out and how some things don't lead to directions.
Some things just, like, fall off.
Or just fall off that. Like, again, Naomi Misora, a bunch of stuff in the, near metal stuff.
Like, basically, Oba's thought process in the beginning was like, oh, well, he basically spent a lot of his time just coming up with these really complicated, crazy situations for Light to think himself out of, was essentially the kind of intent with a lot of the beginning of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And basically from there to, like, connect all the dots and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. Basically the point I'm trying to get at is I don't think... I want to say, like, I don't think this is like a, like a Yu Yu Hakusho thing where it's like clearly, oh, they wanted Togashi to keep continuing with Yu Yu Hakusho, but Togashi's like, yeah, no, I'm putting a full stop to this. Like, I don't think it's that kind of situation, but as far as I could tell, there's no real base for people's arguments when it comes to, like, where Death Note should have ended or how long it should have continued or whatnot. It's...
Yeah.
I think Jump kind of learned their lesson after Yu Yu Hakusho that doing that is not a good idea.
No.
Yeah, because Togashi sabotaged his own manga to make it lose popularity so they would cancel it. Like, he put in so little effort that, like, he not only tested, like, the editorial department's, like, patience of what they could run, but he, like, tested the readers who, like, were getting frustrated by it too, and so they were like, okay, if you're not gonna do this, then fine, you can end your series.
And then we have that giant fuck you ending.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think it's to that extent, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit involved. Like, either editorial was involved, or it's just a matter of Oba thought this could go on, like, this part of the story could go on for longer, but he ended up wrapping it up too quickly.
I think it's probably a combination of both, because I'm sure, like, the editors wanted him to continue it.
Mm-hmm.
But Oba, at the same time, Oba was probably excited that he had such a hit series. So he's like, maybe I can figure out another way to work this without L.
Yeah, because they also mentioned in How to Read that the first volume of Death Note sold 1 million copies in 2 months.
Yeah, which is insanely good.
So I guess unless there's anything else you guys want to bring up before we probably wrap up here sometime soon.
Go ahead.
Something I kind of wanted to talk about from my personal experience rereading Death Note again is that something I kind of realized as I was reading through it was that and I'm not exactly sure I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to word this. Because it's kind of weird. Like, while rereading through Death Note, because with a lot of different manga series or whatnot that I tend to revisit, most of the time I find that I feel like I gain some kind of new appreciation from revisiting certain series. Just to name a few off the top of my head, stuff like, Gintama, Sket Dance, Nero, Aishou 21, a lot of my favorites are my favorites because every time I revisit them, I feel like I gain some kind of new perspective or just something new in general from revisiting certain material. Whereas in the case of Death Note, I don't feel like I really got that kind of change in perspective. Like, reading through Death Note, I guess technically my second or third time, really no matter how many times I come back to Death Note, I usually kind of have the same experience almost. Aside from, I guess not exactly the same experience because, as with my first experience, I was really new to a lot of the story, obviously. But I guess the same experience in the sense of like, I'm getting what I got out of the series the first time I read it. Like, with this second or third time reading Death Note or visiting it or whatever, I got a really fun, exciting battle of wits with a lot of twists and turns. And that's what I get every time I visit Death Note. Just the fact that, like, even though I know where a lot of the story is going, I still enjoy a lot of the, it's worth getting through certain sections of Death Note to get to a lot of my favorite moments, such as moments with Soichiro Yagami and his heroics and the last volume of with the final clash between Nier and Light, just a lot of stuff. Like, a lot of that stuff is some of my favorite material in Death Note, and whenever I revisit Death Note, I always like re-experiencing those moments. But Death Note for me personally is not the kind of series where every time I revisit the material, I gain some kind of new. I gain some kind of new insight from it. Like like Death Note does not really change for me every time I revisit it. Like, it's Death Note in one way or another is still, for the most part, the same experience, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but I just thought was kind of interesting how this most recent, revisit with Death Note, I found certain sections kind of dragging because, like we mentioned a couple times in the show here today, that, like, a lot of the monologues get really repetitive, and it is hard to get through some of those. When you know what's coming and you know how everything is going to resolve. So in that aspect, man, like at some point, I really felt like, I think I even tweeted about it. I was like, Light, shut up! Like, will you just stop talking for 5 pages? Like, it's so much text to read.
At first, I thought I was just like a really slow reader or something, but I'm like, no, it's just Oba's writing too much.
Like, it would take me like 2 hours to read through a volume. Like,
same. Sid took like an hour though, because he's not human.
I don't know. I just have a faster reading speed. I read each volume in about 45 minutes to an hour.
Sid,
to me, that does say something, because for me, my normal reading rate for a volume of manga is half an hour. So Death Note does take me 1.5 times to 2 times longer to read a single volume than most other manga.
Yeah, so that checks out, because my average volume takes about 45 minutes to an hour. I sort of get lost in the text, because for me, it's like I have this mentality of being like, okay, I want to remember these sentences as much as possible for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. Which is like a terrible idea in Death Note, because like so much of it's repetitive.
And I mean, like, Obata talks about in How to Read, like, his process with trying to make everything visually interesting because of how much text there is. And I appreciate him for trying, because most of the time he succeeds. But then like when you get to like the second half of Death Note with all of like Nier and Light's monologues, like Obata's art and his layouts can only really do so much to like...
Yeah, because there's so much text covering the page that, like, a lot of the art, even if he's like doing amazing art in the background, it's just like hard to focus on it because it's already covered.
Yeah. So like Obata tries, he definitely tries, but sometimes it's hard to compete with how much text is on the page.
Yeah. But you do get, like, your time investments worth from, reading a volume of Death Note. Like, you feel like you get what's worth, like, the price you have to pay for reading it. Like, what, $15 for the omnibus?
Yeah, the black edition.
You get, like, good content out of it compared to most other manga because of how dense the story is.
On a side note, I find it weird that the black edition of Death Note, it has all the color pages, but it doesn't have them in order.
Yeah, that bothered me. I don't know why they didn't just put it in order. I mean, and they only have, like, the color spreads.
Yeah.
They don't have, like, the color pages where, like, just the regular pages of the manga were in color.
Like, Colton, I'm not sure if you've, like, looked at the black editions before.
I have not.
But, like, okay, so, like, they have the color pages in the volumes, but they're after the volumes that they're released in. Yeah. And they're not in order either.
That's really weird.
Yeah, so, like, the color pages that would have been in, like, the first volume, they're in the second volume, and I don't understand the thought process behind that.
It's weird.
The only actual color page of, like, the manga that isn't a color spread is, like, the first one for the first chapter, but for the subsequent, like, volumes, they didn't do the color pages.
Yeah, which is strange. Because they're clearly putting the effort to put the color in the book. So...
Huh, well, that's really weird, but okay.
Yeah.
That's another thing, too. I noticed that Death Note gets a lot of color pages, so I can't help but assume that, like, either...
It was popular.
Yeah, I was gonna say either Shueisha was really pushing for it, or it was really popular. Because I remember hearing at one point, I don't remember how true this is, but I remember hearing at one point that, like, Death Note in the beginning was one of those things where it's like, it didn't rank very well in Shonen Jump amongst the other series at the time, but it was basically it continued because it was selling like really well as far as volume sales goes.
Yeah, I was looking at the TOCs before we started recording, and the first rankings are kind of been in the middle, but it doesn't seem like it was doing terribly. Like, it's not doing like a jump like Robot Laser Beam's doing, where it's like going from the absolute bottom to the absolute top.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was just doing kind of middle of the road, and then it picked up traction.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me that the series had more success in tankobon sales because maybe more people heard about it and would rather like buy the volumes than like pick up Jump, because this series does have like appeal outside of the normal Jump audience.
Yeah.
Like there are people who don't otherwise like Jump manga, but might like Death Note, that might discover it and be interested in it and pick up the volumes and just continue reading it that way. So I think that also contributes to why Death Note is so popular, like, in the States as well, and is one of, like, the best-selling manga in the States, is that, like, even if you're not interested in other manga, like, you might go out of your way just to get Death Note, because Death Note interests you.
It's kind of like an outlier within, like...
Yeah. And there are other, like, cases like that, like One Punch Man.
Yeah.
And, Tokyo Ghoul, Attack on Titan, I think.
Tokyo Ghoul is the interesting one, I say.
Yeah.
But, I guess, was there anything else we want to talk about? Or I think that might be about it.
You can go on and on about Death Note. I mean, I think there are other characters or other things we could talk about, but I think we kind of touched all the key points of what, is interesting about Death Note, what makes it unique and special, some of its flaws and things we were a little frustrated with, and then I think, I guess overall, we can still say that we enjoyed Death Note a lot. I think it still holds up pretty well. You, as a first-time reader, VLord, you seem to enjoy it a lot. You were engrossed in reading it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's been a series that I've been wanting to read for a long time. And I've been considering watching the anime, but I kept hearing about how many, like, changes it makes from the manga, and I was like, okay, when I first experienced Death Note, I want to experience the manga. So I'm glad I finally got around to doing it.
The anime is worth watching. It's more over the top, and again, it frames Light's actions in a different way that I'm not entirely comfortable with, but overall it's entertaining.
I mean, I'll definitely check out the anime at some point, because I do like Tetsuro Araki as a director, but yeah.
Oh, you know what? Actually, as long as we're talking about the anime, real quick, I think because I've seen both, obviously, and like now that I've seen both, like reading through the manga, I think I do enjoy the manga more because, like, as entertaining as the anime is, in like an over the top sense, I kind of prefer the tone of the manga more. Because, like, the manga kind of takes itself seriously, but, like, there are still moments of levity that I feel like, or, like, levity or comic relief, whatever you want to call it, that I feel like help balance out the tone in the manga a lot better, personally. Whereas I feel like the anime either takes itself too seriously or takes itself too seriously to the point where, again, it is over the top. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I enjoy that too. Like, you know, I love stuff like the potato chip scene and all according to Keikaku and whatnot.
I'm gonna take this potato chip and eat it!
I don't know if the anime... I guess the anime takes itself seriously in the sense that, like, it frames a lot of things with, like, this much heavier, like, Christian symbolism and allusions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have a scene where L is washing Light's feet, which is...
Wait, what?
Yeah, and like in episode 25, when, you know, that's the episode where L dies, they add in a scene where, you know, before, you know, Light gets Rem to kill L by writing his name in the notebook, like, there's this short break where, like, they're on this rooftop, and it's raining, and then afterwards, like, they go back inside, and they're soaked, and so L offers to wipe Light's feet, so... Another thing in the anime is that they really play up kind of a romantic sexual tension between Light and L, which, you know...
That's really weird.
The fan base runs with. But the feet washing scene is like a allusion to something related to Jesus in the Bible or whatever. I don't remember what it exactly is.
Yeah, and again, I enjoy the anime for what it is, but as far as tone is considered, I really enjoy the more grounded feel of the manga personally.
Yeah, I mean, the manga is way more grounded. The anime plays things up way more over the top and it does take itself a little too self-seriously, just in the use of its, like, orchestral music and, and its heavy allusions to Christianity. Framing Light is like this Jesus-like figure. Which is, not what, I'm not very comfortable with that.
But Light did nothing wrong.
Yeah, along with, Dio and Griffith and, I had a third one, now I can't remember. You know, all those beloved characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think overall, like, I enjoyed Death Note. I enjoyed revisiting it. Especially, you know, with the live action movie coming up. Like, basically, I wanted to revisit it because, you know, I wanted to have the series fresh in my mind when, you know, when the movie actually comes out. You know, I'm not gonna go in, like, comparing every single little thing or expecting it to be exactly like the manga, because it's not gonna be exactly like the manga.
Adapt this exact panel, this exact way, at this exact angle.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't say Keikaku. This is the worst adaptation I've ever seen.
0 out of 10, no Keikaku.
To address a question asked by us from Daikun over on Animation Revelation, what are our thoughts on the upcoming Netflix movie? My thought is, like, it's clearly going to be an interpretation of the concept of Death Note, not a straightforward adaptation, and I think that's perfectly fine because there's a lot of things you can do with the concept of Death Note. And what they're going for with the film version of Light is a very different character, a character that has, like, more of a moral struggle in terms of, like, being, like, given the conviction to kill people and then become Kira. Like, it seems like he's going to have more of a conflict that will last a lot longer. And they're changing many other things around about, like, the characterizations of other characters and what their motivations are. So it's best not to think about it as an adaptation of Death Note in the sense that it is a one-to-one translation of characters from page to screen, but more of an interpretation of the idea of Death Note.
Hopefully it does that better than the Ghost in the Shell film.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully. I mean, that's a pretty low bar. You have to hope that, like, Death Note couldn't
honestly, it's
anywhere.
Pretty hard to fuck up Death Note. Compared to Ghost in the Shell.
compared to Ghost in the Shell.
Unless you make Light sympathetic.
No, I think that's what they're trying to do with the Netflix film. Again, they're not trying to do the same character as Light Yagami in the manga. They're making a different character. He's not the same Light, so I think they are going to make him more sympathetic. But it's going to be more tragic because, like, his fall from grace will be, like, even more like... It was kind of like Walter White, in a sense. Like,
yeah.
Okay. It will be even more extreme because, like, he'll start off as more of a good person and he'll have, like, more conflict in doing these horrible things. But then he will become what Light became, what Walter White became, and just, you know, become immersed in his evil and obsessed with killing.
Yeah. And that's fine in my opinion because, like, the problem with, like, the Ghost in the Shell film is that it tries to do both things. It tries to create its own new message while also trying to copy what's already been done. Yeah. This Death Note film seems to be doing its own thing. Yeah. And that's what you should be doing with a live-action adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, when you put it like that, I'd be open to that, honestly.
Yeah. So I have a lot of optimism for the Netflix film, and, you know, it'll be out by the time you're listening to this, so we'll have known whether it's good or not. But I guess you're going to have to hear our thoughts about the film proper when we do our At Movies episode on it.
Which will come out in 7 months.
I might just edit that one immediately to get it out on time.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're done here, though.
Yeah. This was a good discussion. A good 2 hours worth. There's a lot to talk about with Death Note. It's a very dense series with a lot of interesting things to say.
Yeah.
And... I'm glad to have done it. It was great to reread the series after 7 years or something.
This was my first time rereading it in, I want to say 8 or 9 years, something like that. VLord, thanks so much for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Where can the people find you?
Yes, people can find me on Twitter at VLordGTZ. That is VLordGTZ. And yeah, just hit me up if you want to talk about JoJo or Conan or really anything. I just kind of lurk on there. I'm also on my anime list under the same name and, like, yeah, a bunch of other places. Usually if, like, you find a place that has a guy named VLordGTZ, it's probably me because no one else uses that name.
And Sid, what about you?
You can find me at LumRamyasha on Twitter and as LumRamyasha on Animation Revelation, my anime list. Basically, wherever there's a guy called LumRamyasha, you can assume it's me. So there you go.
All right, yeah, definitely follow both of these guys. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at SniperKing323. You can also listen to a few other podcasts I record, such as Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast. You can find that at gintalifelessons.wordpress.com. Or if you want to hear me talk about Detective Conan / Case Closed, you can hear me talk about that series in particular on One Podcast Prevails. That's at onepodcastprevails.wordpress.com. But if you want to follow all comic and manga Mavericks, so here's what you do. You want to go to all-comic.com. That's where we put every episode of the podcast first. You can also follow All Comic via Facebook at facebook.com/all.comic or on twitter.com/allcomic_. But if you want to follow Manga Mavericks, you want to follow us on Twitter at manga_mavericks. You can also follow us on Tumblr at mangamavericks.tumblr.com. Basically follow us over there for all the latest updates on the podcast, especially Twitter. You should also subscribe to us on YouTube. I know we probably still need a couple more subscriptions in order to get to 100 subscribers, in order to get a custom URL. Definitely follow us on there for snippets of our podcast. This will probably end up on YouTube at some point here in the future. And for even some original content, I know Sid has some stuff coming up here, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, definitely go subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you want to email us anything, what do you think about Death Note? What are some other series you're reading? What do you think about all the news we covered on today's episode? Any thoughts on anything we covered on this episode? Please send us an email over at mangamavericks@gmail.com and we'll read it on the show. But the most important thing, guys, is that you subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, the artist formerly known as iTunes. And I think that's going to be about it for this episode. This was a good one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to episode 38 of Manga Mavericks on allcomic.com. And we will see you guys next time for episode 39. Bye, guys.
Sayonara.
Later.